James Melendez, thank you for joining me today on my channel, James All About Business. Today's topic is organizational critical thinking, an essential component for all organizational types. Stay tuned. A lot of organizations are not utilizing critical thinking skills from startup to legacy organizations that have been around for hundreds of years. This is very unfortunate. I love these two cartoons, and there's actually more of them out there. This is exactly what probably you've experienced. I know I have. And everyone's saying yes, or they feel compelled to raise their hand. And they're saying things like, this is crazy. This will never work. Worst idea ever. You've got to be kidding me. Say it ain't so. The symptom of this is personality over process. And it should be the other way around all the time. That is process over personality every single time. And that's very unfortunate. There are manifestations that happen from this. These pictorials are very emblematic of groupthink or non-critical thinking. The Bay of Pigs was a disastrous event in American history. It was the failed attempt of the United States to invade Cuba to overthrow the communist government. Ultimately, Ellen Dulles and team were forced to resign, but a lot of scholarship went into this, and it wasn't just the CIA director. It was so many people involved in the administration who all said yes. Nobody gave a critical thought. Additionally, you could look at situations like the Space Shuttle Challenger. The Challenger's O-rings were allowed to go on even when it was known there were problems. There was no critical thinking of somebody raising their hand saying, there's a problem here, we're concerned about safety. Everybody said yes, no one said no. We can look at Watergate, the Vietnam War, the 737 MAX, even the Salem witch trial. All these things were incorrect in their assumptions. Lack of critical thinking skills occurred, and this is what you get. It's a real world manifestation. And this does happen in organizations as well. So you look at Kodak, Enron, Swiss Air, Arthur Andersen and Company. These are just a few. You probably have stories of your own from your own work experiences, companies you've worked for, or maybe nonprofits, perhaps even governmental organizations that fail at doing something such as implementing, utilizing, and respecting and engaging critical thinking skills. Now, crucial decisions require critical thinking. Organizations of all types need to have voices that encourage critical thinking to make crucial decisions. It is not just about decisions and how to make a decision. It is to have fruitful conversations with teams within organizations. In any given organizations are people who have enough subject matter expertise to contribute to a meaningful and necessary dialogue to making the right decisions. Critical thinking skills are not new. It goes back to Socrates and his concepts of seeking evidence, examining concepts, reasoning and assumptions, understanding the implications of the spoken word and what is actioned. So these things are attributed for at least 2 millennia. And even in that 2 millennia, we still lack critical thinking skills in most organizations. I talk to friends who work at many organizational types, and this is a subject matter that actually comes up quite frequently. And the subject matter is not just bringing out whether there's a lack of critical thinking. That word doesn't even come up, or the phrase doesn't even come up. But ultimately, if you dig further, if you probe further, you find there is a deficit of critical thinking capability. Particular slide here, it's not just for classrooms or education. It's not just theoretical, but it lives in every part of our organizational lives. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm giving a definition that I've developed for organizational critical thinking, because I really want to pull out and tease out what it really is. So, right decisions for the organization ahead of any particular person, group, team, or vested interest. I'm reading these each word by word because I think it's very important to think about. Capturing all considerations in the present state to the future state. So, instituting the framework of process over personality, codifying and communicating decisions in the utmost of transparency, and explaining the rationale. These are really forgotten about in almost any organizational type today. Now, I like to really point to a word cloud, because this word cloud tends to bring out those things that are essential in terms of critical thinking. It's about responsibility, complexity, respecting, about success, data integrity, being candid, having a logical position. It's about business. It's about distillating ideas. It's about problem solving. There's more you can add to this word cloud that fits your organizational type. So reasons for critical thinking, it's quite essential to think about this in the framework of your organization today. I'm going to go through some of these, not all of them. So the right systems, process excellence and optimization, all this comes down to profitability, being efficient, having innovation, and reducing waste. Increasing engagement amongst your stakeholders, not just your employees, but your stakeholders. That's your entire community of your organization. So when I think of organizations, many organizations have the wrong systems. So one thing I think about the right systems, this is something that I live day in, day out in all organizations that I've worked in my past. So I've seen organizations select something that was really overpowered for their specific needs. So when you think of the right system, or perhaps they actually are not fit for purpose or fit for use. And so that could be something where they're competing systems. Perhaps it's really not meeting the needs of the organization. Often, there's a lot of business processes that are not mapped to the systems, hence process excellence and optimization. When all these things are not firing correctly, you have a deficit in terms of engagement for your employees. It's a hard place to work in. There is not ease of completing work. There's also product and service quality really suffers. The processes are really not optimized and are perhaps not even written out. I've worked at organizations where a process lives in someone's head versus an actual written process. So processes being revised on a constant basis. Process excellence and optimization includes mapping the process, giving it graphical capability and showing what the process looks like, talking about the process, updating the process over time, making sure it's optimized for things that do change. One thing in all organizations is change is constant, and it's something that we have to adapt to. We have to help our team members to work efficiently, to find fulfillment and engagement in what they're doing, making sure that it is not too difficult to use and is not so time consuming, then doing valuable contributions to the organization. So I think these are really great call outs here. So we live through this in our working lives, and it's something that we can improve upon in any organizational setting that we're in. So this is really one way to think about perhaps a center of excellence. This is one way to think about a center of excellence. This could be in your organization. In this particular organization, this is a hypothetical one. This is not a real one. I made this one up. But you could really map to those particular characteristics that are important to your organization. In this hypothetical organization, I thought a team excellence is a great way to put as a keystone, but also anchoring that with knowledge management, process excellence, project management, communication, Lean Six Sigma, 5S, governance, well-being, NPS, and so forth. You can add, customize, but making sure that this is really mapping and giving that arch of support to your organization. And when I think of critical thinking, I think of the critical thinking continuum. So when you're creating culture, a critical thinking culture, it becomes second nature. But components, subcomponents of this are observation, examination, prescription, research, connectedness to the organization. So all these features come together to make an organization that runs differently. This should be part of a center of excellence. So the organization is always having that support from subject matter experts in knowing how to program in critical thinking. When you do this for your employees and your stakeholders, it becomes very important to them because they feel a connectedness to the organization. They're allowed to contribute. They're allowed to have a voice. They know that the organization is not run by personality, but by process. It's predictable in many ways that organizations that are run by personality are not. So I look at this in terms of charter and executive sponsorship, leveraging support for critical thinking. You do need a champion in any organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO, but it can be. It could be other people who have respectability and have visibility to the organization. Critical thinking is an empowering agent. Now it's creating a plan, adding to your center of excellence, organizational development. So critical thinking is an empowering agent to your organization, as I just mentioned, to show there's a way of expressing their critical thinking capabilities. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's actually a reward for doing so. You're improving the organization. You have a contribution to make. You have a voice that actually should be heard. And I also think when I talk to people about critical thinking, sometimes it's that we need to make a decision and we need to make one quickly. You can still do that, but you can also listen to voices that may point out really important things. What about the implication of not having a unified system? What about the implication of just doing this regionally versus internationally? So when you hear keywords like that, you have to think about what it means to the organization. Ultimately, the organization runs well when it's codified, when it's understood, when there are very few exceptions, and is much more of a rule-based organization, one, again, based on process versus personality. And step C is really about enhancing the program altogether, continuous improvement of critical thinking skills. It's not just having an organization that has a keen eye on critical thinking. I believe this endeavor is absolutely necessary. So I think there's different ways of thinking about continuous improvement of critical thinking skills and capabilities. It's important and imperative for an organization to have critical thinking culture. It's important in that organization to have that voice, to have that contribution, and being willing to be heard, being willing to be listened to as a team member or manager or an important stakeholder in any organization. Now, I'm going to stop here and thank you for listening. I do appreciate it. And also, if you have questions and comments, please list them down below. So thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I will see you in the next video topic from James, all about business. Stay tuned for more. Thank you again.